You know what you're listening to?
Is that a trick question?
It's the I Still Love This Game podcast with your host, Matthew Damian.
He's an idiot. Don't listen to this. He's an idiot.
Hello and welcome to episode 45 of the I Still Love This Game podcast. In today's show, obviously, we're going to focus on the Cavaliers and Pacers Game 3. There were a couple of other Game 3s today as well, the Wizards and Raptors, and there's actually one going on right now, the Bucks and Celtics. Neither of those games are overly competitive, so I'll keep an eye on those. I'll talk about them briefly at the end, but I did want to talk about the Pacers and Cavs specifically. And Cleveland came out very strong. LeBron looked in control and comfortable, and Kevin Love shot very well in the first half as well, and that countered any hopes Indiana had in truly collapsing on James in the first half. But then we almost saw two carbon copies. One of Game 2, which the difference was, though, Indiana in Game 2, they were able to start their countback and mount their comeback in the second quarter. They waited to the second half of this game. And also, if you think back a year from now, Indiana had a huge lead. It was 20-something points, and it was in Game 3. They were down 2-0 at that in that scenario, and they were up against the Cavs, but the Cavs came storming back to win it. So you flip it all the way around here, and now it's the Cavs up, having a big lead, and then blowing it and looking lost down the stretch, even though they looked almost unbeatable in the first half. Almost a carbon copy of that. But whenever you have a big comeback like this, the first question that comes to mind is, how did that just happen? Of course, when it's happening, you're like, well, I can't believe what I'm watching. But then once the game is over and you try to reflect it, you try to figure out what actually went wrong if you're a Cleveland Cavaliers supporter. And what I saw was a team that just wanted it more. And I wince at that concept and saying that, because we're talking about professional teams here. So you would like to think that their motivation levels, especially in the playoffs, would already be at an absolute max in a pivotal game like this as well, when the series is tied. But the Pacers' strategy was so simple, and they were challenging everything. I'm not just talking about shots, I'm talking about passing. They were denying passing lanes, and I'm talking specifically with LeBron. They were denying passing lanes, pressuring the ball, and even making a catch difficult, let alone forget passing the ball, but even catching the ball was difficult. And if LeBron was able to get the ball, most of the time it was 25 plus feet away from the rim, and the Pacers were happy with him triple threading that far away, because he doesn't have a reliable shot from 25, 30 feet away from the basket. Not many people do. And in many ways, it was reminiscent of what we saw with Damian Lillard in Game 3 against the Pelicans. He looked frustrated, and the Cavs, just like the Portland Trailblazers, had absolutely no counter. And these are the games that LeBron and the Cavs miss Kyrie Irving the most, because he was essentially the pressure release for them. Because you can't cover two guys like that. If you cover two guys like that with intense ball denial off the ball, you open yourself up to back cuts and back screens, which lead to such easy baskets that it's demoralizing to a team. If you're working that hard to prevent a guy from touching the ball and someone else gets an uncontested layup within the half court, then that pretty much takes the heart out of your team. And Kyrie Irving had the ability to work away from the ball, but if, say, LeBron James was being denied like that, he would get the ball and he would take over the offense, and he was good enough. And we saw that plenty of times in big games and big situations in the playoffs alongside LeBron. So let me put it really simple for this. The Cavs would not have lost this game, and they wouldn't be down 2-1 if they still had Irving. And this is in no way an excuse for LeBron, because if anything, I hold him accountable for Kyrie Irving leaving. It was his passive-aggressive drama-seeking behavior that pushed Irving to the point where he demanded a trade and actually threatened to sit out the season if that trade request was not met. So I'm not going to buy for 1 second that the lack of competency from his teammates is the reason they lost this game. Because I know all the spotlight will be on Love and Korver and Smith or whoever. Because he had a guy alongside him that had the ability to get him out of those situations. The same way that Michael Jordan had a Scottie Pippen, and you never saw MJ force Scottie Pippen out with these kind of antics. And okay, a better example. Did we ever give Kobe a pass when they were struggling after Shaq left because Shaq was no longer around? Absolutely not. Because he was to blame for Shaq leaving. Rightly or wrongly, he was the guy held accountable for Shaq's departure. And then when Kwame Brown wasn't delivering, we never said, oh, well, it's the Lakers management for trading away Shaq. No, he didn't get a pass for that. And I'm not going to give LeBron a pass for forcing Kyrie Irving out of there when Kyrie Irving would have made sure that they wouldn't be in this predicament. But let's hold up for a second. Whatever happened to that BS notion that LeBron makes his teammates quote unquote better? It doesn't matter who he has alongside him. It doesn't matter if they're current All-Stars or future Hall of Fame players. He does not, and let me repeat this, does not make his teammates better. That claim is nearly as absurd as him being called a great defender. But I'll get to that in a minute. But if he is going to get all the praise when his teammates play well alongside him, shouldn't he also be criticized when his teammates play bad and lack confidence? Consistencies can be an absolute bastard. Also, people have said that he's played his best basketball of his career this year. Well, if that's his best, and the Cavs can't beat Indiana when they also have another All-Star, Kevin Love obviously, alongside him, along with relatively useful role players, well, what does that say? And people have the nerve to call him the greatest of all time, ahead of the likes of Jordan and Bird and Magic and Russell. Give me a break. And yeah, Bogdanovic was incredible down the stretch in the fourth quarter, but once again, and I said I would get to this, where was LeBron? Why was Smith guarding him? If LeBron is a quote-unquote great or good defender at least, he should be on him. I nearly said switch, but it's not even a switch. That's his matchup. Once again, for how many times have we said this throughout his career, LeBron had no interest whatsoever in competing. He just wanted to coast in this game. And the Pacers, they showed the ability to win a game coming from down 16 or 17 points at halftime, whatever it was, and that's with Oladipo by far and away their best player. He was struggling. And Game 4 is a must-win for Cleveland. If they go down 3-1, I don't think they can run off 3 straight. If we're being honest here, we're yet to see a complete game from the Cavs in this series. So if they go down 3-1, almost an impossible task at that point because the margin for error is so small when you're down 3-1 because you have to run off 3 straight. And I don't care if you got 2 games at home. They haven't played well at home all year anyway. And I know I harp on a lot about coaches making adjustments, but maybe it's time. Maybe it's time for LeBron to make an adjustment and head back to Miami in his off day to re-energize himself once again in not so suspicious circumstances. I'm sorry, but I really couldn't resist that one. And if it sounds like I'm frustrated, it's because I am. I'm disappointed. And no, I'm not going to start shooting 30-footers. I'm actually going to point out why I'm frustrated here. We just saw a legendary performance in LeBron in Game 2, at least in the first half, right? And if you appreciate basketball, this is the level of play that we've been waiting for out of LeBron. We love it. We love it when he produces. But then to follow up that performance with a solid start to Game 3, and then to just sort of give up and to not compete. These guys from Indiana are so overmatched when they're trying to defend LeBron. And they are coming up with everything. They're putting their heart, their soul into this, into trying to at least be competitive. And his response is to not even get back on defense, or not even fight for the ball, or to stand around and look at his teammates perplexed, or to start jacking up 25-footers. He's better than that. And for him to switch off Bogdanovic when he was on fire and leading the Pacers back, and for him to switch off, that was unforgivable. And if I'm his teammate, you know what? There's no wonder that there's a pattern here wherever he goes, and his teammates do not feel comfortable, and they do not play well alongside him. As I said, it doesn't matter if they're role players. It doesn't matter if they're all-stars. It doesn't matter if they're Hall of Famers. Nobody plays well alongside him. They all play better without him. And I'm telling you right now, if he goes wherever he goes next year, even if he stays in Cleveland, it will be the same thing. I just don't want to see him go to Philadelphia and mess up that style of play and that culture that they're developing. He would be toxic in that culture, the same way he's been toxic everywhere else. Yeah, sure, they might be better by 1 or 2 games in the regular season, but the development of Embiid and Simmons would go completely out the window, and they would implode. All of them would implode. The same way everywhere he has gone, even Miami, Cleveland twice, they have imploded. There hasn't been one place that he has been that hasn't imploded. And all the great players I listed before, you can go further down the chain, all the way to the players like Isaiah Thomas or Dr. J or whoever, Charles Barkley even. The teams do not implode. The same way that the teams that are led by LeBron James always implode. And what it always boils down to, he always talks about and preaches accountability to his teammates and all this other BS. He does not hold himself accountable, and nobody holds him accountable. The only place that he was held accountable was in Miami when he tried to get Eric Spoelstra fired before their first championship. And when Pat Riley laid down the law to him and said no, that's when he played his best basketball. But to the surprise of absolutely no one, when his contract was up again, he bolted again and he went to a place where he could control it, and he was no longer accountable. There's a reason why David Blatt was fired and they brought in Tyronn Lue. Tyronn Lue's not allowed to coach this team. Nobody is allowed to hold this guy accountable. That's nonsense. And that's why we see such dud performances, not just from him, but from every team he goes to. Every single role player. And I wouldn't be this upset, but people want to compare him to Jordan and Bird and Magic and Russell and Chamberlain and Kareem and Shaq and Kobe and Duncan. That's all the players' names I can fit in one breath. But seriously, have a think about that before you throw his name into that conversation for the greatest players of all time. He does not belong in there. He doesn't. And that's the reason why. In terms of talent, yeah, he may be the most talented. He may be the most physically gifted outside of Shaq. But when it comes down to actually producing and performing, no way. He's not in the same breath as those greats. And now that, speaking of breaths, I've taken a few of them and calmed down a little bit, we can touch on the Raptors and Wizards game. Look, I kind of expected the Raptors to not show up in Game 3, but they better show up in Game 4. They do not want a long series against Washington because, one, they might lose it, and two, if they have championship aspirations, they'll take care of the next game and finish it off in 5. If this goes to 7 games, even though Washington is a talented team, there's no excuse for the Raptors to be playing around after they establish a 2-0 series lead. And the other game is in the fourth quarter now. It's a significant 20-point lead. And obviously, the questions that I had about the Celtics is if they could keep up that intensity and that ball pressure and their confidence playing on the road. They haven't been able to do it in Game 3, but don't be surprised if they rebound, because I'm not sure if Milwaukee can produce performances like this in back-to-back games. But it'll be interesting to watch. Game 4 will be a must-watch for both of those series. Game 3 is not so much, clearly. But thanks so much for checking in, guys. I apologize for how short this podcast is, but I'm super busy today. I just quickly went to the microphone, recorded this, and it's going to render, and I'll get it uploaded. Thanks so much for listening. We got 4 games tomorrow, by the way. I'm looking at it now, so I'll give you some quick predictions for that, and I'll let you go. The first game up is Philly versus Miami. I think Miami... Philly plays so well, especially with Embiid, but I think Miami they understand the importance of this game. As I said, they're led by veterans. I think that they win and tie this series up. Pelicans and Blazers, look, I can't see any scenario that the Blazers win unless if Damian Lillard gets about 50 points, so I'm going to say Pelicans. I think the Rockets go up 3-0 on the Timberwolves, and I think the Thunders bounce back and lose. That'd be one way of bouncing back. I think the Thunder come back and win, although it wouldn't shock me. I think that series is going to go 7, though, and it will end up 2-2. So whoever wins Game 3 will end up losing Game 4. Anyway, thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the games today, and I hope you enjoy the games tomorrow. Podcast tomorrow with 4 games to cover. Take care, guys. I'll speak to you later.